August 15, 2026. The precise time of Iran's latest public response has not been publicly confirmed. By Saturday, the message from Tehran was blunt. The Strait of Hormuz would remain restricted, direct peace talks with the United States were still not back on track, and Iran was telling Washington that pressure would not force it to surrender control of the waterway. That response came less than a day after President Donald Trump dramatically raised the stakes in New York. Trump said Americans may have to accept higher gasoline prices while the conflict continues, called Iran very evil, and said that after defeating Iran, he would soon declare the Strait of Hormuz a territory of the United States. That was not a legal declaration, it was a political threat. But in the middle of a war, with commercial shipping under attack and negotiations stalled, it immediately sharpened a much bigger question. Is Trump trying to force Iran back to the table, or is the fight over Hormuz moving toward another round of escalation? For now, the diplomacy is not producing the breakthrough Trump had suggested was close just days earlier. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran had not decided to resume talks with the United States. Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi went further, saying the strait would be opened or closed under Iran's command, and arguing that Washington had to accept what he described as defeat. The United States rejects that claim completely. Trump has repeatedly said America has total control over the Strait of Hormuz. His administration has also kept a naval blockade on Iranian ports, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the U.S. Navy could maintain that blockade indefinitely by rotating ships and forces through the region. So both sides are now making competing claims of control over the same strategic waterway, and the shipping numbers show why this matters far beyond the language coming from Washington and Tehran. On Friday, ship tracking analysis cited by Reuters showed only 2 vessels passing through the strait, with no crude oil shipments visible. Before the war, more than 130 ships a day moved through the waterway. Some vessels can travel with tracking systems turned off, so the count is not perfect. But the difference is enormous. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrow entrance to the Persian Gulf. Before the war, roughly 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas moved through it. That means a dispute over a few miles of water can reach American gas stations, European factories, and Asian importers within days, and that pressure is already showing up in the United States. Reuters reported that the average price of regular gasoline was about $4.08 a gallon on Friday, roughly 29% higher than a year earlier. Oil futures also rose during the week as hopes for a diplomatic breakthrough faded. Trump's answer was unusual because he did not deny the pain. Instead, he told supporters that paying a little more for gasoline was worth it if the conflict prevented Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. That puts the president in a difficult political position. Trump has spent years promising lower energy prices. Now he is asking Americans to tolerate higher prices because of a war he says is necessary for national security. Democrats are already trying to turn those costs into a midterm election issue, while Trump is arguing that the price at the pump has to be weighed against the risk of a nuclear-armed Iran. But the bigger problem for the White House is that economic pain has not yet produced the diplomatic result it wants. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says more measures against Iran are coming and has promised a level of economic isolation beyond what Washington has already imposed. The administration's strategy appears to be shifting away from an immediate large new military offensive and toward sustained financial pressure, the naval blockade, and the threat of heavier force if Iran does not change course. Iran, however, is trying to prove that it can impose costs too. Tehran has made control of Hormuz one of its strongest bargaining tools. Iranian officials say the strait will not fully reopen unless Washington meets conditions that include lifting sanctions, ending the blockade on Iranian ports, and releasing frozen Iranian assets. Iran has also demanded compensation for war damage. Trump has rejected those demands and responded with his own calls for Iranian reparations. That is one reason the negotiations have become so difficult. The argument is no longer only about reopening a shipping lane. It is about who pays whom, who controls passage, which sanctions disappear, whether American blockades are lifted, and what happens to Iran's nuclear program. Earlier this month, there were signs that a narrower deal might be possible. Iran and Oman had been working on an arrangement for traffic through the strait. Reuters reported that one proposal could give Iran authority over ships entering the Gulf, while other details remained unresolved. Iran was seeking fees tied to cargo value, Oman had discussed a lower fee, and Washington opposed fees altogether. For the United States, allowing Iran formal authority over inbound traffic would be a major concession. For Iran, reopening the strait without meaningful concessions from Washington would mean giving up one of its most powerful forms of leverage. That gap has not closed. The June agreement that was supposed to create an immediate and permanent end to military operations has already unraveled. Trump declared that arrangement over in July. Iran later called it suspended. Both sides accused the other of violating commitments. By this week, a senior Iranian source told Reuters there had been absolutely no progress in efforts to revive that framework. Then came new attacks on shipping. The United Arab Emirates accused Iran of attacking vessels operated by Abu Dhabi National Oil Company while they were moving through the strait. Iran did not immediately respond to those specific accusations. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Center also reported that a bulk carrier had been struck by an unknown projectile, although it was not immediately clear whether that report referred to the same incident. Those attacks matter because they turn a diplomatic dispute into a physical security crisis. Every tanker owner now has to think about whether a ship can safely enter the Gulf. Insurers have to calculate war risk. Energy companies have to decide whether cargo can move. Governments have to decide whether naval forces will escort ships, enforce blockades, or respond to an attack. And each one of those decisions creates another opportunity for miscalculation. There is also a second front in this pressure campaign: Iran's own economy. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has acknowledged the damage that sanctions and the U.S. blockade are causing, blaming them for severe inflation and economic strain. That gives Trump evidence for his argument that sustained pressure is hurting Tehran. But economic pain does not automatically equal political surrender. Iran's leadership appears to believe that keeping Hormuz restricted gives it leverage over the same countries that are trying to isolate it. If global fuel prices stay elevated, pressure grows not just on Tehran, but on Trump, Gulf governments, European economies, and Asian energy buyers. That is why this standoff is so unusual. Both sides are trying to squeeze the other economically at the same time. Washington is blocking Iran's ability to sell and ship. Tehran is restricting a waterway that much of the world needs. The White House is also widening its diplomatic search. With direct U.S.-Iran talks stalled, American officials have been speaking with other governments, including European countries with interests in maritime security and nuclear diplomacy. That does not mean a new mediator has solved the crisis. It shows the opposite. The existing channels have not delivered an agreement. So what happens next? The first thing to watch is whether the Trump administration follows through on the new economic measures promised for the coming week. If those sanctions are as aggressive as Treasury officials suggest, Iran could respond with tighter restrictions on shipping or new demands before returning to diplomacy. The second is the actual traffic through Hormuz. Political statements can change by the hour. Ship movements are harder to spin. If crude tankers begin moving regularly again, that would be evidence of a real de-escalation. If traffic remains near a standstill, the diplomatic picture remains bleak, no matter how optimistic officials sound. The third is whether Oman can revive a technical shipping agreement without first solving the entire war. That may be the most realistic near-term path. A limited deal that makes commercial passage safer could reduce oil pressure and create space for larger negotiations. But even that requires agreement over who controls the lanes and what conditions come with reopening them. And finally, watch Trump's language. Over the past several weeks, he has moved between predictions of a deal, threats of new attacks, promises of economic punishment, and now a statement about declaring the Strait of Hormuz American territory. Iran is answering with equally confrontational language and insisting that it controls the waterway. That does not mean a wider war is inevitable. Both sides still have reasons to avoid a major new escalation. The United States wants lower energy prices and an end to a costly conflict. Iran wants sanctions relief, access to its ports, and an economy that can breathe again. But the danger is that each side also believes pressure can force the other to move first. And right now, neither one is moving. What do you think? Should Trump keep increasing economic pressure until Iran reopens the Strait of Hormuz, or should the United States offer concessions to get shipping moving and restart negotiations before this standoff becomes even harder to control?